The massive doors of the Grand Council chamber opened with a sound like thunder. Jiwon Kim walked into the huge room and felt very small. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it, and the walls were covered with strange symbols from dozens of alien worlds. Around her sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy, but none of them looked happy to see her. Jiwon wore her best diplomatic uniform, but it felt useless here. The other species were giants compared to humans. The Vorthek delegation sat in chairs that were 3 times taller than her. The crystal beings from Altair glowed with inner light that made her eyes water. The tentacled creatures from the outer rim moved in ways that made her stomach turn. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. She had negotiated trade deals, helped solve border disputes, and built friendships with species across the galaxy, but today felt different. Today the air in the chamber was thick with anger and fear. High Counselor Vexstar rose from his throne. The creature was 12 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. His voice boomed through the translation devices that every species, warrior species, has been judged, he said, and his words echoed off the walls. We have watched humans for 50 years since you first joined our coalition. We have seen your wars, your violence, your endless need to fight and conquer. Jiwon felt her heart start to beat faster. She had expected this meeting to be difficult, but the tone was worse than she had imagined. Captain Do-Yun Park stepped up beside her. He was the military attaché, and his job was to represent Earth's defense forces. We have contributed much to the galaxy, he said in a calm voice. Our doctors have saved millions of lives. Our engineers have built stations that connect your worlds. Our diplomats have prevented wars between your species. The insectoid representative Clicktar made a clicking sound that the translator turned into laughter. Minor contributions, he said. Your species brings chaos wherever you go. You cannot control your emotions. You make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. You are dangerous. Other voices joined in. The Meridian Empire's representative nodded in agreement. The Corvan delegation whispered among themselves. The Zelkari Mining Guild speaker stood up and pointed one of his 6 arms at the humans. You took our mining contracts by underbidding us, the Zelkari said. You sent your people to work in conditions that should have killed them, but somehow they survived and prospered. This is not natural. This is not fair. Jiwon wanted to explain that humans had simply found better ways to extract the rare minerals. They had used creativity and teamwork to solve problems that other species had given up on, but she could see that the council did not want to hear explanations. High Counselor Yathara stood up. She was from one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and her people had helped found the coalition. Her voice was softer than Vexstar's, but somehow more frightening. We have voted, she said. The decision is final. Humanity has 30 standard days to withdraw from all galactic territories. You will return to your home system and remain there. You are no longer welcome in coalition space. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translators could not handle properly. There were clicks and whistles and electronic noises that mixed together into a wall of approval. Jiwon felt like she was drowning in the noise. Wait, she called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos. She tried again, louder. Please listen to us. We can discuss this. We can find a solution. The noise stopped suddenly. High Counselor Vexstar looked down at her with what might have been pity. There is no discussion, he said. The vote was unanimous. 47 species voted to expel humanity. 0 voted against the motion. 0 abstained. You have 30 days. Captain Do-Yun Park stepped forward. His face was red with anger, but his voice stayed controlled. What about our families, he asked. What about the humans who have lived on your worlds for decades? What about our research stations, our trade agreements, our hospitals? You will take them all with you, Vexstar replied, or they will be arrested as illegal aliens. The choice is yours. Jiwon felt the world spinning around her. 50 years of careful diplomacy destroyed in a single meeting thousands of human families who had made lives among the stars. Forced to abandon everything they had built, she looked around the chamber one more time, trying to find a friendly face. Ambassador Quilton of the Meridian Empire looked sad, but he would not meet her eyes. The young delegate from the Altarian Republic seemed upset but stayed silent. The representative from the Corvan Peace Federation actually looked angry at the decision but said nothing. Dr. Minho Lee, the head of human scientific operations, stepped up beside Jiwon. Our research, he said quietly, What about the plague vaccine we developed for the Andorian worlds? What about the new agricultural techniques that feed billions on the rim? Worldsglichter waved a dismissive claw. You will leave all research data behind, he said. The coalition will continue your work without you, but Ji-won knew that was impossible. The human research teams did not just follow procedures. They improvised and adapted and found solutions that no one else could see. The data was useless without the human ability to think outside the rules. She took a deep breath and stood as tall as she could. We accept your decision, she said, her voice carried across the silent chamber. We will withdraw peacefully. We will gather our people and return to Earth. We will not resist, and we will not retaliate. Some of the aliens looked surprised. They had expected the emotional humans to argue and plead and make threats. Instead, Ji-won continued in a steady voice, we are sad to leave, but we are not angry. We wish you well. In your future, perhaps someday when wisdom overcomes fear, we might meet again as friends. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the translation devices seemed to hold their breath. High Counselor Yathara nodded slowly. You have 30 days, she repeated. The dismissal is final. Ji-won bowed formally to the council, then turned and walked toward the massive doors. Her small human delegation followed behind her. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber as they left the heart of galactic civilization for the last time. Outside in the corridor, Captain Do-yeon Park finally let his anger show. Those idiots, he muttered. They have no idea what they just did. Dr. Minho Lee looked pale. What about the Kepler mining operation, he asked. What about the medical stations? What about the deep space rescue teams? We pack up and go home, Ji-won replied. We follow their orders exactly, and we do it with dignity. But as they walked toward their small embassy quarters, Ji-won was already thinking about the future. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to live without humans. They would discover that some things could not be replaced by logic and procedure alone. She just hoped that when they finally understood their mistake, it would not be too late to fix it. The human evacuation began 3 days after the council meeting. Captain Do-yeon Park stood on the bridge of his flagship Seoul Dawn and watched the organized chaos of the largest withdrawal in galactic history. Hundreds of human ships filled the space around Harmony Station like a metal cloud, preparing to return to Earth. Every ship was packed beyond capacity. Families who had lived on alien worlds for generations were forced to abandon homes they had built with their own hands. Scientists packed decades of research into cargo containers, knowing that most of their work would be left behind. Traders closed businesses that had taken years to establish on the bridge. Do-yeon watched the scanner displays that showed human ships launching from 17 different star systems. The evacuation was happening everywhere at once, and somehow his people were making it work without panic or disorder. Communications Officer Haijin Nam looked up from her station. Sir, we have a message from the Kepler mining operation. Soyeon Choi reports the Zalkari are already moving equipment to take over the facility. Do-yeon nodded grimly. The Zalkari had been complaining about human mining techniques for years. They thought the humans were somehow cheating by finding better ways to extract rare metals. Now they would learn that creativity and teamwork could not be replaced by following rules. Tell Soyeon to complete the shutdown according to protocol, he said. Leave everything in perfect working order. We will not give them any excuse to blame us for their failures. The hardest part was not the logistics of moving millions of people. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the friends they were leaving behind. Many aliens had quietly supported the humans but were too afraid to speak against the council decision. Dr. Minho Lee sent a final message to his research partner, Dr. Quiles from the Meridian Empire. I am leaving the plague vaccine data in the secure files, he transmitted. You know the procedures, but remember that sometimes you must break the rules to save lives. The reply came back quickly, my friend. I cannot say this officially, but many of us believe the council has made a terrible mistake. Take care of yourself and know that you will be missed. Similar messages were being sent across the galaxy. Human teachers were leaving final lessons for their alien students. Human doctors were updating medical records for patients they would never see again. Human diplomats were finishing peace negotiations that other species would have to maintain on the mining world of Kepler. 442b Soyeon Choi supervised the shutdown of the most productive extraction facility in the sector. She had spent 12 years developing new techniques that could mine the rare crystals without destroying the delicate cave systems where they grew. The Zelkari supervisor Kestar arrived with a full team of engineers. He looked around the facility with obvious satisfaction. Soon this will be running properly, he said. Your human methods are too dangerous, too unpredictable. Sozing handed him the operational manuals. Everything you need to know is in these files, she said. The extraction process requires precise timing and the cave systems are fragile. If you follow the procedures exactly, you should be fine, but she knew that the procedures only worked because humans had the flexibility to adapt when conditions changed. The Zelkari were excellent engineers, but they followed rules religiously. They had never learned to trust their instincts. When the unexpected happened, the evacuation from the medical stations was even more painful. Dr. Hyjin Nam had spent 20 years developing treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Her hospital on Proxima Station had become famous throughout the galaxy for saving patients that other facilities had given up on. As she packed her research files, she received a message from a young Altarian doctor. Dr. Nam, the message read, "My daughter was born premature on your station 3 years ago. Your techniques saved her life. I wanted to thank you before you left." Messages like that kept coming. Patients from dozens of species sent their gratitude. Alien doctors asked for copies of procedures that might help them continue the work, but Hyjin knew that the procedures were only part of the solution. The real key was the human ability to see patients as individuals, not just collections of symptoms. The diplomatic evacuations were the most complex. Ambassador Taiyangzhou had spent 30 years building relationships between species that had been enemies for centuries. His work at Harmony Station had prevented dozens of wars through what he called coffee diplomacy, informal conversations that solved problems before they became crises. As he sealed the last of his files, he received a secure message from Ambassador Quilton. "This is wrong, old friend," the message said. "Your people brought hope to our galaxy. I fear we will regret this decision." Sun Taeyong composed his reply carefully. "I hope you are wrong," he wrote. "But if you are right, remember that humans do not hold grudges against friends. We judge beings by their actions, not their words." The withdrawal was not just about moving people. The humans had to decide what to do with their technology and research. Some species demanded that humans leave everything behind. Others secretly asked for copies of important data. Captain Doyun Park made the decision that would define the evacuation. "We leave them the procedures and the equipment," he announced to his staff. "But we do not leave them our spirit, our creativity, our willingness to take risks. Those things cannot be transferred." The final ships left Harmony Station exactly 30 days after the council meeting. The evacuation had been completed without a single casualty or major incident. The humans had proven once again that they could organize and execute complex operations under pressure. As the last transport ship jumped to hyperspace, something important was lost. The informal networks that connected different species began to weaken. The creative solutions that had held the galaxy together started to fade. The bridges that humans had built between hostile civilizations began to crumble. High Counselor Vextar watched the departure from his office. He felt satisfied that the troublesome humans were finally gone. The galaxy could return to proper order without their emotional chaos and unpredictable methods. But in the intelligence department, Shindar was compiling reports that told a different story. The human contributions to galactic civilization were far more extensive than anyone had realized. They had been involved in almost every major breakthrough in medicine, technology, and diplomacy. For the past 50 years, the galaxy was about to discover what it meant to live without humans. And the education would be painful. 3 days after the last human ship departed, the first problems began to surface. The careful balance that had kept peace between the Vorthan Empire and the Crystal Collective started to wobble without human mediation. The trade routes that depended on human merchants began to experience delays. On Kepler 442b, the mining operation continued normally for exactly 1 week. Then the first cave-in occurred. The Zelkari engineers had followed the procedures perfectly, but they had not understood the subtle signs that warned of unstable conditions. The explosion killed 15 workers and destroyed half the facility. Kestar stood in the ruins trying to understand what had gone wrong. Everything had been done according to the manual, but the manual had not prepared them for the unexpected in the hospital. On Proxima Station, the first medical crisis occurred when a new strain of Andorian flu appeared. The existing vaccines were useless against the mutation. The alien doctors had the procedures that Dr. Hyjin Nam had developed, but they did not have her intuition for when to break the rules. The first death occurred within hours, more followed quickly. The procedures worked when everything went according to plan. But medicine was never that simple across the galaxy. The same pattern was emerging. The humans had left behind their knowledge and their equipment, but they had taken with them something that could not be replaced. They had taken their humanity, and slowly the galaxy was beginning to understand what that meant. 2 years after the human exodus, the galaxy was drowning in chaos. The Galactic Council met in emergency session every week, but their formal procedures could not solve problems that required creative thinking. The rigid protocols that had worked for millennia were useless against the new reality. The Vorthan Empire and Crystal Collective had declared war over the border dispute that Ambassador Taiyang Zhou would have solved with coffee and conversation. Both sides mobilized their fleets and prepared for a conflict that would devastate entire star systems. The plague that had started on Proxima Station spread to 47 worlds. The mutation had evolved beyond anything the alien doctors could treat. They had the human research data but lacked the intuition to modify treatments for new symptoms on Earth. Ambassador Jiwon Kim watched the galactic news feeds with growing horror. The death toll climbed daily as preventable disasters struck world after world. Her secure communication channels buzzed with desperate pleas for help. Director Kim came a message from Dr. Quellen on Proxima Station. The plague has reached the children's hospital that Dr. Nam designed. We are losing patients every day. Can you send medical advice, please? Another message arrived from the Corvin Peace Federation. Ambassador Zhou, our civil war has begun. 3 provinces have declared independence and violence is spreading. We need mediation techniques that only humans understand. The requests multiplied each day. The Altarian Republic begged for engineering consultations to prevent power grid failures. The Meridian Empire asked for agricultural advice to stop famine. The Zelkari Mining Guild wanted safety protocols to prevent more explosions. All the messages carried the same desperate tone and the same warning: keep this secret. If the Council discovers we contacted you, our species will face punishment. Captain Duyun Park paced the corridors of Earth Defense Command like a caged animal. We have the largest fleet in human history, he told his staff, and we are sitting here doing nothing while people die. The human military had expanded rapidly after the Exodus. Earth's leaders had worried that the galactic situation might threaten their home system. The shipyards worked around the clock, building vessels with the latest technology, but the ships remained in Earth orbit following the Council's order to stay away from galactic space. The crews trained for battles that never came, while real battles raged across the galaxy. Dr. Minho Lee was even more frustrated. His research teams had developed treatments for the mutated plague, but they could not share them without violating the expulsion order. He spent his days watching death reports and his nights designing solutions that no one could use. The medical crisis reached a breaking point when the plague struck the Andorian homeworld. The virus had evolved to attack their specific biology, and the death rate climbed to 30%. The Andorian government sent secret messages to Earth begging for help. Our children are dying, the messages said. Diarnam's research could save them, but our doctors cannot interpret the data properly. Please send medical advisors. We will accept any conditions. Ambassador Jiwon Kim brought the request to the Earth Council. The debate lasted for hours. Some members wanted to send immediate assistance. Others worried about the consequences of defying the galactic prohibition. We could send volunteer medical teams, suggested Dr. Lee, not as official representatives, but as independent contractors. The Council cannot complain about civilians choosing to help. The proposal was tempting, but Jiwon understood the risks. If we send any humans into galactic space, the Council will claim we are invading. They will use it to justify everything they said about us being dangerous. The decision became even harder when the economic collapse accelerated the loss of the Nexus trade hub had disrupted commerce throughout the galaxy. Trade routes that depended on human merchants were controlled by pirates and criminals. The Corvin Peace Federation, which had been a model of cooperation for centuries, was tearing itself apart in civil war. The provinces that had been unified by Human diplomatic efforts remembered their old hatreds and forgot their shared interests. Meanwhile, the Zalkari Mining Guild faced bankruptcy after 3 more facilities exploded. The rare minerals that powered galactic technology were becoming impossible to extract safely without human expertise. High Counselor Yuthara received reports that painted a picture of complete systemic failure. The careful balance that had maintained peace and prosperity for millennia was collapsing everywhere at once. We need solutions, she told the council, but her voice lacked confidence. The other species are withdrawing from coalition agreements. Our authority is crumbling, Counselor. Vexstar refused to admit the obvious. We will adapt, he declared. The galaxy survived for millions of years before humans appeared. We can survive without them now, but the intelligence reports told a different story. The galaxy had never faced these challenges before humans arrived. The humans had been the invisible force that prevented small problems from becoming disasters. Star presented his analysis to a closed session of the council leadership. The data was undeniable. Human intervention had prevented thousands of conflicts, resolved countless disputes, and saved millions of lives without their stabilizing influence. The galaxy is returning to its natural state of chaos, he reported. The species are too different to cooperate without mediators who understand all of them. The council leaders studied the data in silence. The evidence was overwhelming, but accepting it would mean admitting that they had made a catastrophic mistake on Earth. The pressure to act was becoming unbearable. Dr. Hyjin Nam received a message from her former colleague Dr. Quilas that broke her heart. My friend, the message said, we have lost 30,000 patients to the plague. The children's ward is empty now. They all died because we could not adapt your treatments to the new mutation. Similar messages arrived every day. The Altarian Republic reported power grid failures that left millions without electricity or heat. The Meridian Empire faced famine as their agricultural systems collapsed without human optimization techniques. Captain Do-Yun Park made a proposal that divided the Earth Council. We should send aid missions, he said, not as coalition members, but as humans doing what humans do. We help when others need it. The debate raged for days. Some argued that helping would prove human compassion. Others worried that it would be seen as aggression. The council remained deadlocked while the galaxy burned. The decision was made for them when a massive refugee crisis erupted. The war between the Vorthan Empire and Crystal Collective had displaced millions of civilians who fled to neutral territories. The refugee camps were overwhelmed and disease spread rapidly through the crowded conditions. The humanitarian disaster was visible from Earth's monitoring stations. Children were dying from preventable illnesses, while supplies rotted in warehouses due to poor distribution. Ambassador Jiwon Kim stood before the Earth Council with tears in her eyes. We have a choice, she said. We can follow the letter of the law and watch innocents die, or we can follow our conscience and act. The vote was unanimous. Earth would send humanitarian aid to the refugee camps regardless of the Council's prohibition. If the galaxy wanted to call it an invasion, so be it. The first aid ships launched within hours. Medical teams, engineering crews, and supplies raced toward the disaster zones. Each ship carried a simple message: we came because you needed us. The human return to galactic space was about to begin, but this time it would be on their own terms. The human medical team landed on Galactic Prime under heavy security. The Council homeworld was in chaos as the plague spread through the population. The same virus that had killed thousands on other worlds was now claiming victims in the halls of power. Dr. Hyjin Nam walked through the corridors of the Grand Council Medical Center and saw alien leaders who had voted for human expulsion now lying in hospital beds. The irony was bitter, but she felt no satisfaction in their suffering. High Counselor Yuthara was among the patients. Her crystalline body was dulled by fever as the plague attacked her nervous system. She looked up at the human doctor with eyes that held no pride, only desperate hope. Can you save us? She whispered. Dar Nam checked the medical readings and began adapting treatments for the council leaders. Biology, the same flexibility that had made humans valuable to the galaxy, was now saving the lives of those who had rejected them. We'll try, she said simply. That is what doctors do. The medical mission to Galactic Prime became a turning point in galactic history. The human doctors worked alongside alien physicians, teaching them to modify treatments and trust their instincts. The death rate dropped dramatically. Within days, but the humans did more than just treat the plague. They rebuilt the medical infrastructure that had been collapsing since their departure. They trained local doctors in techniques that had been forgotten. They restored hope to a world that had been dying. The success on Galactic Prime was repeated across the galaxy. Human aid teams arrived wherever they were needed, bringing not just supplies, but the creativity and adaptability that had been lost on the Vorthan homeworld ambassador. Taiyang-zhou mediated peace talks between the Empire and Crystal Collective. The war that had seemed impossible to stop was ended with a simple compromise that honored both sides. The Vorthan wanted recognition of their territorial claims. The Crystal Collective wanted assurance that their trade routes would remain open. Taiyang suggested a joint patrol system that gave both species what they needed. Why did we not think of this solution before? Asked the Vorthan Emperor. Because you were thinking like warriors instead of neighbors, Taiyang replied. Sometimes the obvious answer is the hardest one to see. Pattern repeated everywhere humans returned. Mining disasters stopped when human engineers taught proper adaptation techniques. Medical crises ended when human doctors showed alien physicians how to break rules safely. Trade disputes resolved when human merchants demonstrated creative solutions. But the most important change was in the Galactic Council itself. The member species were no longer willing to accept the failed leadership that had caused the crisis. The revolution began in the council chambers when Ambassador Quilton stood up during a public session and spoke words that changed everything. I move to dissolve the current council leadership and call for new elections, he announced. The expulsion of humanity was not just a mistake, it was a crime against galactic civilization. This time the motion received dozens of seconds. The chamber erupted in debate as representatives who had been silent for months finally found their voices. Counselor Vextar tried to maintain order, but his authority was gone. The species that had once feared the council now openly defied it. The humans saved us when our own leaders failed, declared the Altarian representative. The least we can do is admit our mistake and ask them to return. The vote was overwhelming. 47 species voted to dissolve the council leadership and invite humanity back into the coalition. 7 voted against and 3 abstained. High Counselor Yathara, who had recovered from the plague thanks to human medical care, made the announcement that ended an era. The Galactic Council formally invites humanity to return to the coalition as full members and founding partners. The message was transmitted to Earth, where Ambassador Jiwan Kim received it with mixed emotions. The invitation was everything she had hoped for, but the price had been too high. We will consider the invitation, she replied, but understand this: we will not return to the old system. If humans rejoin the coalition, we do so as equals, not subjects. The negotiations took months, but the result was a new treaty that transformed galactic government. The reformed Galactic Coalition was established with humans as founding members. Alongside the older species, the new charter included revolutionary provisions. The Human Conscience Clause gave any species the right to provide aid to others regardless of political considerations. The Adaptation Protocol required all regulations to include flexibility for emergency situations. Most importantly, the treaty established the principle that diversity of thought was not a weakness, but a strength. The galaxy needed species that thought differently because different perspectives led to better solutions. Captain Doyun Park, now Admiral of the Reformed Coalition fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship as it docked at the rebuilt Nexus Trade Hub. The station was larger than before and designed with human engineering principles that emphasized adaptability. The strangest part, he told his mixed species crew, is that they never actually needed us to leave. They just needed to realize that we were all better together. The rebuilt station was a symbol of the new era. Humans worked alongside aliens in every department, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. The coffee shop where Ambassador Taiyang-zhou had conducted his informal diplomacy was expanded into a cultural center. Dr. Minho Lee established the Galactic Medical Research Institute, where doctors from every species could collaborate on treatments. The Institute's motto was carved into the wall in dozens of languages: together, we heal the mining operations. Were redesigned with human safety protocols that emphasized worker intuition over rigid procedures. The Zelkari Mining Guild hired human consultants not as replacements but as partners who could teach adaptation techniques, but the most important change was in the attitudes of the species themselves. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was not about following rules, it was about understanding each other and working together. Despite differences, the old council had tried to maintain order. Through fear and rigid hierarchy, the new coalition maintained peace through friendship and mutual respect. The difference was visible everywhere. Ambassador Jiwan Kim stood in the new council chambers watching representatives from dozens of species debate in a spirit of cooperation instead of competition. The chamber had been redesigned with human input to encourage informal conversation. A young Altarian representative approached her after the session. Ambassador Kim, she said, I wanted to thank you for teaching us that strength comes from unity, not uniformity. Jiwan smiled and replied, we taught each other. The galaxy is stronger because every species brings something unique to the table. The galaxy had learned its lesson about the value of diversity the hard way through crisis and near collapse, but sometimes the most important lessons can only be learned through pain. As the reformed coalition grew and prospered, the story of the human expulsion became a cautionary tale taught in schools across the galaxy. It reminded future generations that fear of differences leads to weakness while acceptance of diversity leads to strength. The council had seen humans leave and thought they were gaining stability. Instead, they had lost the very thing that made stability possible, the bridges between species that humans had built with patience and understanding. But the galaxy had been given a second chance to build something better, and this time they would not waste it. The humans had taught them that some bridges once burned could be rebuilt stronger than before. The key was remembering that they were all better together. The human aid ships arrived at the refugee camps like angels of mercy. The massive orbital platforms were packed with millions of displaced civilians from the war between the Vorthan Empire and Crystal Collective. Disease and hunger were spreading through the camps while local authorities struggled to maintain order. Dr. Haijin Nam stepped off the medical transport ship Soul Hope and saw conditions that broke her heart. Alien children lay dying from diseases that could be cured with basic medicine. Adults collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition while food supplies sat unused because no one understood proper distribution. The camp administrator was a young Altarian named Kulik who had been overwhelmed by the crisis. He greeted the human medical team with desperate relief. Dr. Nam, we sent requests for help to every coalition member. He said, only you answered. Our people are dying and we cannot save them. Mijen immediately began organizing triage stations. Her team worked alongside local doctors, teaching them to adapt treatments for different species. The human ability to improvise and modify procedures saved lives within hours. Meanwhile, Captain Do-Yun Park coordinated the arrival of engineering teams at failing power stations. Across the galaxy, the installations that human engineers had designed were breaking down without proper maintenance. On the Meridian homeworld, Chief Engineer Soyoung Choi found power grids that had been shut down for safety reasons. The local engineers were afraid to restart them without following exact procedures, but the procedures assumed normal operating conditions. The fusion reactors had been offline for 3 weeks, she reported to Do-Yun. The Meridian engineers followed the startup sequence perfectly, but the systems had degraded during the shutdown. They need modifications that are not in the manual. Soyoung spent 2 days working with the local team, teaching them to trust their instruments and adapt to changing conditions. The power came back online and millions of Meridian citizens had heat and electricity again, but the human aid missions did something else that surprised everyone. They refused payment or political concessions. The humans simply helped and prepared to leave, offering to return if needed. This confused the alien governments who were used to aid coming with strings attached. The Korvan Peace Federation offered to pay for medical supplies, but Dr. Minho Lee refused. We came because you needed us, he said. Friends do not charge friends for help. The refusal of payment had an unexpected effect. Species that had supported the human expulsion began to question their decision. The Altarian Republic had voted for expulsion, but now their children were alive because of human doctor. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human agricultural specialists saved crops on 7 worlds. Human rescue teams pulled survivors from disasters that local forces had given up on. Human diplomats mediated conflicts that had seemed hopeless, the galaxy noticed and began to change. The Zelkari Mining Guild publicly apologized for their role in the expulsion vote. The Corvan Peace Federation declared humans to be honorary citizens with full rights. The Altarian Republic renamed their capital city New Sol, but the most important change was in the Galactic Council itself. The member species were abandoning coalition agreements faster than new ones could be written. Half the galaxy was in open rebellion against Council authority. High Counselor Yathara faced a crisis that threatened to destroy everything. She had worked for. The council chambers were half empty. Because so many species had withdrawn their representatives, we are losing control, she admitted to her advisors. The member species are ignoring our directives and making their own agreements with each other. Counselor Vextar still refused to accept reality. The situation will stabilize, he insisted. We just need to enforce our authority more strictly, but enforcement was impossible when the council had no power to enforce anything. The Vorthan Empire and Crystal Collective had ignored council mediation efforts and gone to war. The Meridian Empire had withdrawn from all treaties. The Zelkari Mining Guild was operating independently. In the intelligence department, Shindar compiled reports that painted a picture of complete systemic collapse. The Galactic Coalition was dying, and everyone knew it. The final blow came when Ambassador Quilton of the Meridian Empire made a public statement that shocked the galaxy. The expulsion of humanity was the greatest mistake in galactic history, he declared. The humans were not the problem. They were the solution to problems we did not even know we had. The statement was broadcast across every inhabited world and sparked massive protests. Species that had been afraid to speak out finally found their voice. The Altarian Republic held demonstrations demanding human readmission. The Corvan Peace Federation passed resolutions condemning the expulsion. Even some council members began to break ranks. The representative from the Outer Rim territories stood up during a public session and spoke words that had been unthinkable months earlier. I moved to rescind the expulsion order, he announced. Humanity should be invited back into the coalition, not as junior members but as equals. The motion died without a second, but the fact that it had been made at all sent shock waves through the political establishment. Change was coming, whether the council leadership wanted it or not. Earth Ambassador Jiwon Kim watched the galactic news feeds with mixed emotions. The requests for human aid were increasing every day, but so were the risks of escalation. The council could decide that our aid missions are acts of war, she warned the Earth Council. We need to be prepared for anything. Captain Doyun Park had already reached that conclusion. The human fleet was being repositioned to protect the aid missions and refugee camps. If the council wanted a fight, they would get one, but the council was too weak to fight anyone. Half their members had withdrawn their support, and the other half were questioning their leadership, the authority that had once controlled. The galaxy was crumbling. The breaking point came when the plague reached the council homeworld of Galactic Prime. The virus had mutated again and was killing members of the council itself. High Counselor Yathara watched her own people die while human medical data sat unused in classified files. Dr. Haijin Nam received a secret message from the council's chief medical officer. Please send help, he begged. We are dying and our pride is not worth more lives. The message was forwarded to every major news network in the galaxy. The council leadership that had expelled humanity was now begging for human aid. The irony was not lost on anyone. Ambassador Jiwon Kim made a public statement that was broadcast across the galaxy. We will send medical teams to any world that needs them. She announced human doctors will treat any patient regardless of species, politics, or past decisions. That is what it means to be human. The medical mission to Galactic Prime launched within hours, carrying treatments for the mutated plague. The ship carried a simple message of hope. Humanity had not forgotten how to forgive. The galaxy was about to learn that humans did not hold grudges against friends. They judged beings by their actions, not their words, and the actions of species across the galaxy were showing that they wanted their human friends back. The question was whether the Galactic Council would have the wisdom to admit their mistake before it was too late. 6 months after the human departure, the galaxy began to crack like glass under pressure. The first major failure happened at the Kepler mining facility where Soyoung Choi had worked for 12 years. The Zelkari engineers had followed every procedure perfectly, but they could not handle the unexpected. The explosion tore through the underground tunnels at dawn when the night shift was changing over. 37 workers died in the blast, and the rare crystal veins that had taken decades to locate were destroyed. The facility that had been the most productive in the sector was now a smoking crater emergency. Teams rushed to the scene, but the damage was catastrophic. The Zelkari mining director Kestar stood in the ruins holding the human operational manuals that had become useless. The procedures worked when everything went according to plan, but mining never went according to plan. How did the humans prevent this? He asked his chief engineer. We have records of 17 critical situations during their operations, but they always found solutions. The engineer looked through the incident reports. The humans documented what they did, but not how they decided to do it. He said they would say things like, trust your instincts, or adapt to conditions, but those are not proper engineering. Instructions. Kaskast sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council requesting an investigation. The Council appointed a committee to study the accident, but they found only technical failures. The real cause was something they could not measure or quantify. The humans had possessed an ability to think beyond the rules. Meanwhile, the medical crisis was spreading. Dr. Hejin Nam had left behind detailed procedures for treating the Andorian flu, but the virus had mutated in ways that made the standard treatments useless. The alien doctors followed the protocols exactly, but patients kept dying. On Proxima Station, Dr. Quellen struggled with a patient who was not responding to treatment. The human protocol said to try 3 different medications in sequence, but the patient was getting worse with each one. What would Dr. Nam do? He wondered aloud to his assistant. The assistant checked the record. She would probably break protocol and try a combination treatment, but the regulations forbid mixing those medications. Dr. Quellen faced an impossible choice: follow the rules and watch his patient die, or break the rules and risk losing his medical license. He chose to follow the rules. The patient died 6 hours later. The same scene played out on medical stations across the galaxy. Doctors had the human knowledge, but not the human courage to act when the rules were insufficient. The death toll climbed steadily as mutations of old diseases returned stronger than before. The diplomatic failures were less dramatic but equally devastating. The peace between the Vorthan Empire and the Crystal Collective had been maintained by Ambassador Taiyongzhou through 15 years of careful relationship building. He had understood that both species valued honor, but expressed it differently. Without human mediation, the old tensions returned. A border dispute that should have been solved with a simple compromise escalated into threats of war. Both sides remembered their ancient grievances and forgot their recent cooperation. The Vorthan Emperor sent a message to the Crystal Collective demanding immediate withdrawal from the disputed system. The Crystal Collective responded with equal force, threatening to defend their territory. The situation that humans would have resolved with a few informal conversations spiraled toward violence. On Earth, Captain Doyun Park monitored the galactic news feeds with growing concern. The reports were buried in technical language, but the pattern was clear. The systems that humans had helped build were failing one by one. We could help, he told Ambassador Jiwon Kim during their weekly briefing. Send medical teams to fight the plague, engineering crews to prevent more mining disasters, diplomatic missions to stop the wars. Jiwon shook her head sadly. The Council forbade any human presence in galactic space. If we violate their order, they will brand us as invaders and use it to justify everything they said about us. But the requests for help kept coming through unofficial channels. Former colleagues sent desperate messages begging for assistance. The Corvan Peace Federation asked for mediation techniques. The Altarian Republic wanted medical consultations. The Meridian Empire requested engineering advice. All the requests came with the same warning: please keep this secret. If the Council discovers we contacted you, it will mean punishment for our species. Dr. Minho Lee spent sleepless nights reading reports of preventable deaths. His research had saved millions of lives, but now people were dying from diseases he had already cured. The treatments existed, but the doctors lacked the confidence to use them properly. The breaking point came when pirates attacked the Nexus trade hub. The massive space station had been the economic heart of the galaxy, and its security had always depended on human tactics. The station's defenses were strong but predictable. Commander Zirek had replaced the human security chief 6 months earlier. He was a competent officer who followed proper military doctrine. But human security teams had never followed proper doctrine. They had improvised and adapted and found solutions that surprised everyone, including themselves. The pirate fleet approached the station using conventional tactics. Commander Zirek deployed his forces according to standard defensive patterns. The pirates expected this and had planned accordingly. What they had not expected was the human ability to change plans in the middle of a battle, but the humans were gone and Commander Zirek fought by the book. The pirates broke through the outer defenses in 2 hours. They captured the station in 4 hours. They killed 50,000 civilians in the process. The economic shockwaves rippled through every inhabited world. The Nexus trade hub had been more than a commercial center. It had been a symbol of galactic cooperation and prosperity. Its fall marked the beginning of the end for the Coalition High Counselor. Yathara called an emergency session of the Council. The chamber that had once been filled with confident voices now echoed with fear and uncertainty. The situation is becoming difficult. She announced, we need new strategies to maintain stability. From the back of the chamber, a quiet voice spoke. Perhaps we should reconsider our decision about the humans. The chamber fell silent. The suggestion was unthinkable. The council had voted unanimously to expel humanity. How could they admit that they had been wrong? Counselor Vextar stood up angrily. The humans are gone and they will stay gone, he declared. We will solve these problems ourselves as we did before they arrived. But in the Intelligence Department, Shandar was compiling data that told a different story. The galaxy had never solved these problems before humans arrived. The humans had been the glue that held everything together, and now that glue was dissolving. The first year after the Exodus was ending and the galaxy was falling apart. The careful order that had taken millennia to build was crumbling in months. The species that had demanded human expulsion were beginning to understand what they had lost, but pride is a powerful force, and admitting mistakes is hard for individuals. It is even harder for governments. And it is almost impossible for a galactic council that had voted unanimously. The galaxy was learning a painful lesson. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, but sometimes if you are very lucky, you get a chance to build something even stronger. The question was whether they would be brave enough to try.